Hey there, my name is Sinan Vural and I'm a senior flame artist from Oslo, Norway. I'm here with the second part of the particle tutorials. And as usual, I'd like to thank Autodesk for sponsoring this video. Welcome to Logik Academy. In this second part of the particle system tutorials, I will try to show you a couple of different techniques or approaches that we usually need when creating motion graphics or some sort of effect. The first one I want to talk about is light streaks. It's basically particles on a 3D path. So again, we of course start with an action, and I'm going to create a light source, which is going to be our particle generator emitter. And add a particle generator. I usually go in and create a color source with 512 to 512, two-pot circular width. Okay, so it gives me like a full circle. If we keep this at 16-bit floating point, then I can go and do a color correction, which is going to create me a soft-edge perfect circle. I connected front and back. So this is going to have a diffuse map, and the particle type needs to be generate, and it's got to be squares. So when we generate them, we see that we're actually generating circles. Um, like I've said before, let's turn off the shading. And then these particles will need a speed of 0 because I am going to animate the emitter. To animate the emitter, first let me create a 3D path. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and finish. So here is our particle emitter generating particles, one on each frame as it moves through here. Now what we want to do is actually generate more than 10 particles per frame. Or let's see this first. It is generating 10 particles per frame, but because the timing steps is set to 1, all of them are actually being created at the exact same spot. So these 10 particles, when I make time steps 10, they should be distributed evenly between, yes, like this. They are distributed evenly between its position between the first and the second frame. So I think the size needs to be a lot bigger, like that. Let's turn sort on and also Z buffer off. And there. Of course, it's probably banking, and that's the particles being generated in front and behind of each other. So what happens if we say sort off? Then the last particle is generated on top of the previous one. So there isn't like a, how do you say, a turning point or like a break. Instead of a circle, what could we use? Let's say to get rid of those all black edges. Okay, here comes something different. What if we turn this geometry or the particle from a blend mode to, say, add? It all goes white everywhere. So if we turn it transparent a little bit, 70. Right, that's not bad. Cool. That's nice. But to add it some more variation, we can rotate the particles during their lifetime. Well, not during their lifetime, but this rotation variable here gives you a rotation of each individual particle, a rotation at the moment it is born. So if we set this to be 0 on frame 1, and on the last frame, if we set it to, say, 250, and let's make the animation linear, so it rotates. But that 250 is not going to be enough. I'm just going to scale this animation to be, I don't know, arbitrarily 700 something. So let's see what happens when the particle that's generated turns. Oh, we got a nice rotation here. So maybe if we want that animation to be even bigger, so we actually want to 1,000 or something, go even more. There, that looks nice. But I think we should maybe make it even some more transparent to get a better feel to it. Yes, that looks nice. So you can use this to create like warbles and this kind of light trails. Of course, since we can now comp in 16-bit floating point instead of creating like a arbitrary star, we could um, paint switch the source, and there you go. You have to fiddle around with your ideal number there. We can improve upon this system by adding some secondary rotation to the particles. Remember this parameter here? We've animated over the lifetime of the generation. That makes the emitter rotate, but we can also add spin to the particles after they are generated. So let's take a look at it again. The generated particles just form like a static graphical form. But if we spin them further, let's say 5 degrees in each frame, then the whole trail starts to rotate in itself. I don't suggest adding variants here because then they will all rotate at different degrees in each frame and it's going to create this mess. So let's keep the variance to 0 and the spin to 4. And we have some internal animation again. We can further add, I'm going to turn this down to 0. And here is a deform animation, which is, let me just create it from scratch. The deform, I want to use something like an amplitude of 10, and it's static, of course. So we have to animate it. So in the first frame, it's going to be 15, and on the second frame, 50.05 is a good number. That's what I found out with a lot of trial and error. And the extrapolation should be linear as well. So if we take a look at it, this is the particle texture, if you remember. So we're wiggling it around. And if we add that to our particle system, see now we have some internal sort of deform running through everything. You can, of course, add the spin again, and it's going to add, let's say, -10, so the movement is to the other way. Maybe that's a bit too drastic. Let's say 5. Okay. Yeah. There is rotation, then there's spin, and there is an added deform. I have here uh, another particle animator, which is going to adjust the size of the particles. So what I have here is I define a sinus function, getting its uh, frame number. So it goes from 1 to infinity. I multiply it by pi because sinus function works in radians. You don't have to do that, but it's easier for me. And since we want to adjust the size of individual particles, this is the lifetime I parameter, individual lifetime of each particle divided by 50 multiplied by 100. So we get a size animation that makes them smaller and bigger. So the trail has sort of a ribbon type animation. So it is possible to add additional secondary or tertiary complications to the stream. What I have here is my generic particle emitting volume with a frame of white as the source and displacement to give it the volume that I need. I'm going to hide the source and I'm generating 50 particles just on the first frame and then turning down them to 0 with a lifetime of 250. So they live throughout the length of the animation. They have like an initial speed of 5 and a variance of 3. And so when I let them go, it's just like they're going everywhere, all around. So what I'm going to try to do here now is to show you how we can use the external node type of particles. So when we turn to external node, we need to import a geometry, parent, a 3D text object, or any other surface or geometry that you can use within the action. For the sake of brevity, I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Now, the most important thing is the geometry or the surface that you're going to use as an external node needs to be named in a specific way. It is the geometry node here, or if it's a surface, that surface needs to be named as particle draw with uppercase P and uppercase D. The name needs to start like this. You might have other particle draw or external node particle types. So I'm going to name particle draw underscore 01. This will work. Um, this is a free model that I found on the internet. Unfortunately, the pivot point wasn't exactly in the center of the object, so I had to like pull it away, connect this. Our quads have become external nodes. And when we press play, they're moving in the direction, they're looking in the direction that they move. Let's try to add a particle animator here as a, let's say, a particle accelerating point. But I played around and got a nice looking animation with my fish here, So actually, I'm animating the acceleration point in 3D space, and our particles, the fishes, are looking towards it. For this part, I want to show you how we can create a flock of birds with the particle system. So I found this image on the internet. I centered all the frames. I erased the numbers. I have myself a nice looping animation here with its corresponding alpha, painted, of course. So the problem with well, not the problem, but like a design choice of the Flames particle system, is you have to have a separate particle generator for each frame of a looping animation, because all the particles that are generated from a single generator share the exact same um, image. So if you have this image as your texture for your particle, all of the particles are going to have that. But what we have here is like a 9 frame uh, flapping bird animation. So to have 9 different frames on different particles, we have to create 9 different particle systems. Not exactly different, but they need to be discrete. So what we have here are 9 different particle generators with 9 different frames of the bird flap animation. So what I did here is I created one particle generator, adjusted it so it gives me a nice starting point, and I copied this one, rather duplicated it. So duplicate, but then I have to have all the parameters linked to the second one. So I went in there and copy channel and link channel. So I did this for all its parameters for the second one. The only thing that I changed or didn't link is the seed override. Now, seed override is how the system distributes the particles when they are generated. So if the seed override number is the same, the particles from 2 different particle generators are going to be in the exact same spot, of course, given that all the other parameters are the same. So what I have here is this second one is completely linked to the first generator, except from the seed override. And then once you have the first one, then you can duplicate this and it will be linked as well. So the first one takes a little bit of time linking all the parameters, but then it's just like duplicating this one and changing the seed override to 3, seed override to 4, seed override to 5. So we have 9 different particle generators with all the animation parameters linking to the first one, but with different seed override values. So we have like a nice distribution uh, for each particle system. What I created here is a V-shaped flock of birds. So when they start, let me turn this down to 0 as well. If we let it go, the birds like flapping their wings, but they're distributed over the V shape. And I have distinctly animating birds. Now to animate them, or like animate the particle system, I'm using this turbulence function here to give them a little bit wobbliness or random movement within given um, range. So they keep the overall V shape, but they all move in like a turbulent pattern. So the particle animator set to transform and it's typed to not speed but position this time is going to allow me to add a distinct X and Y or Z animation to the whole flock. You can also make the particles follow a path. Now the path is you created using the path parameter here. You turn it on. I created a path in the general shape of an S. Now the particles do not strictly stick to the path, but rather they follow the overall movement. Let me turn this off. And I have here an accelerating line, which would probably move the particles around this accelerating line animator. So you can take this and move it interactively. Let's turn this like this. Now their lifetime is 200, so they will be dead after the 200th frame. So now I'm going to make them live for 1500 frames. And now I can pick up this accelerating line and pull the birds towards this line. I really like this interactive way of working with the parameters in general in Flame. I can probably even rotate them. Yep. Now there is another thing that I want to show you here. You can also adjust the movement of the particles using a gravity. It's a more indirect approach. So the particles try to follow the gravitational force along this animating axis. But since this is a 3D move, I can get a 3D object, which I created here. Here I have a 3D model of a bird flapping its wings. The trick here that I used is when I'm using a gravity to move the particles, since it has a vector that I'm rotating, because this gravity is a vector and I use the X, Y, Z rotations, I copied these rotations and I linked them to this axis here. Wherever the gravity is pointing towards, my birds are going to look in that specific direction. So if I parent this to my texture, and let's say these are going to be 400 and this is like maybe 40. Now, since the gravity vector is rotating and that is linked to the parent of this bird, the bird texture is rotating as well during the course of 200 frames. So when I use that rotating bird as a texture, but since the texture is moving in accordance with the gravity, if I press play here, the birds follow the gravity in their motion, and the texture is rendered upstream and gives me the correct orientation for the bird geometry. So let's say this is a sample text that we want the letters of it to fly away. This is going to be our generator and the surface that we are going to be playing around with. So we say it's going to be a particle generator, but now we want to not generate particles from this, but rather explode its particles. So when we're exploding the particles, it's we must set the rendering type to polygons, and we need to add this same image as a diffuse map, right? So, and we turn this transparency of the surface to 100. So only the particle generators are forming the surface now, right? And when we say, let's say the speed is 10 and a variance of 10, we will see the blocks of it flying away. Now, the size of these blocks are actually the resolution of the surface. So if we set this to 40, we are going to see bigger particles there. And let's make the numbers, I don't know, let's explode them all in one go. And let's spin the particles after they are generated, and we're going to add a variance of 5 to each axis, so they will be rotating along there. All the particles will be rotating or spinning rather, along their X, Y, and Z axes. And the emission, the lifetime, let's make that 250 as well. So there you go. And lifetime is 250 as well. So the surface, we explode the surface. The particles are moving towards the camera and they are spinning on their individual axes. Maybe this is too much. Let's make them 10, 10, and 10 on each axis. And because of the difference in their speed variation, all of them have like different speeds. We can make this surface smaller, but since this is a particle system, we need to regenerate the particles. So I go further one frame and then go back one frame so everything clicks into place. We can add particle animator, set it to gravity, make the rotation 90 degrees pointing down, and maybe set it to free. So even if we scale or move or rotate the surface, they all move down. Yeah, I need to set them to speed. There. So even if this surface is like over there and it's pointing towards the center of the screen, one frame further, one frame back, this is the sample text. Now, if we don't make this free, the particles are going to go in a weird direction, considering the down direction is relative to the object. That's why I turned them free. So the particle animator is always making them go camera down. One frame further, one frame back, and there again. Now I have another setup here, which lets me explode the particles and add them like a turbulent move. So I press play and you can see that they are exploding into the turbulent pattern that I always use. Normally, you would only use one animator if you're using this turbulence function. But if you want to move the particles in X, Y, Z separately on top of this turbulence, uh, we add a particle animator. But the way the system works, I have to set the magnitude to 2. Let's see, because I'm hiding this one. So if I press play, this is the speed I get for the distribution. But if I turn this on with its default value of 1, the particles are slower. To get them up to their normal speed, I multiply the magnitude by 2, so it's back to its original speed. Now you can add a position value to the whole system as a block. Of course, it's hard to like control, but you get the idea. So if you want to move the particles in the general direction of X and Y, we could do something like this, and they just fly away. Don't hesitate to drop me a line on Logik or in the comments here. Thank you for watching, and all comments and questions are always welcome. Thank you.